Dámy a pánové, jsem rád, že se pomalu
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to see you back.
Relativně krátký blok, ale strašně
Our last blog is relatively short but terribly interesting because it presents a genesis of the discussions that we had so far in the previous hours, and it concerns the barriers and difficulties in the development of hydrogen management in the Czech Republic. So we are getting back at the very beginning of today's conference, in fact. We would like to use the main points of today's discussion for the tomorrow's discussion with Minister of Industry and Trade, Mr. Sikela, who's going to be with us tomorrow morning. So that is why this block is very important for us. Take your cup of coffee, take any snacks or refreshments and finish eating and drinking here together while we are talking. Barriers and difficulties in the development of hydrogen management. The first speaker is Karel Tichý. He is RIS3 developer for the hydrogen region in Ústí. Oh. We will be happy to have you here now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy that our agenda is really running beautifully, that we are just before matchmaking, so please be patient during the final block regarding the barriers and difficulties. I'm not a big speaker myself. I didn't even want to use a presentation, and I'm not good at maths either. I can't really count well, but I noticed Mr. Onst, and I noticed that he calculated 85 tons of hydrogen per day. So we are getting at the numbers of 0.2 million tons of hydrogen, and even those figures, when we saw the dots on the map, we were really staring with an open mouth when we saw how many places of green hydrogen are going to be in Europe soon by 2030. And that we are going to import 10 million tons of hydrogen. Of course, when we were preparing the organization of this event, we did our homework. And we wanted our forum, after it is being concluded, to be able to continue living, in fact, in a different form. That is why we wanted to identify long-term barriers, and we named those barriers. There are three important blocks. We touched upon all the blocks in the previous discussion parts, and I'm very grateful for that, because we all perceive some problems, some difficulties and barriers. I'm not going to read any definitions or strict conditions for import of renewable hydrogen for industry and trade. I perceive the support of government in the Czech Republic which is not sufficient in my perspective. Of course, we are very grateful for the activity of Mr. Mervát and his colleagues. They do all they can. They do the maximum to help us, but we perceive a mixture of various broad problems when we talk about the construction, Act on Construction, EIA, etc., that were mentioned here as well, that slow down the launch of hydrogen projects. By pointing at those problems, that's a nice thing, in fact, but that's not our goal. We want to move on. We want to work with those problems, and as Nikita rightly mentioned, tomorrow morning the minister is going to be here, and Mr. Sikela should spend a short time with us, maybe something more than 1 hour, and he is going to take part in the moderated discussion as well. We will be very grateful when we will be able to communicate our problems to him and when the minister is going to work on our problems together with his team. Of course, some of the barriers are not in charge of the Ministry of Industry and Trade. They are more general and they are even on the European level. And maybe here, in a good sense of the word, we could be honest and equalitarian and maybe even use the presidency of the Czech Republic in the European Union to promote this idea. There are some participants from abroad as well, and there are people from 12 countries all around the world who are watching. So you see that there are similar problems in the international community as well. That is why I think our forum is very useful for many people, and we see that there are international partnerships that can begin here at this occasion. I'm convinced that barriers can be overcome by sharing common practice, good examples, and by cooperation. I will leave the floor to Nikita, and he's going to invite more competent speakers after me, because those are the people that you came to see. Those are the people that meet barriers and obstacles in everyday life. Those are the people who support strategic projects and who are dependent on the regulations of the Czech Republic and Europe. So I look forward to hearing other speakers. Thank you. Thank you, Karel. You are right. The last block of short presentations is beginning, and the opportunity for hydrogen transition, that's our topic, including the barriers and difficulties. You have 8 minutes of your time, so please use those 8 minutes, not more. I would like to invite the next speaker, that's Vladimír Zemánek, the chair of the regional commercial chamber of the region of Ústí. Please join us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here on behalf of the commercial chamber. The president spoke in a general way, but I would like to sum up what we see in the region of Ústí. So I have 8 minutes. I'm already losing my voice, it seems. Thank you. But I will start this blog on a positive note. I think that something works well in hydrogen, and this is our meeting. This is today's conference, where we see representatives of entrepreneurs, of regions, of big stakeholders. And I would like to thank the Ministry of Industry and Trade for preparing the framework for hydrogen management in the region of Ústí. I would also like to thank for the preparation of hydrogen strategy. Those were about 30 companies and representatives who deal with the issue of hydrogen in the Czech Republic. But especially, I think that we should focus on cooperation, which is not something that's quite common nowadays when preparing hydrogen strategy. But there were representatives of the commercial chambers who cooperated together with the representatives of the Commercial Council and the region of Ústí that understood very correctly that hydrogen could be a topic of the future. I would also like to point out the cooperation that shows that we have representatives of other regions as well, of Moravian Silesian region and of Karlovy Vary. We see, all of us, that hydrogen can be an opportunity for the future, and we need to connect, we need to be strong together so that we can push through our goals at the level of national government and on the European level as well. So this is something that is positive for me. Karel presented a list of some barriers, obstacles, but I'm going to show you my point of view. The first topic is there are many conferences, but few projects. And this should be the other way around. We need to implement projects so that we are strong to be able to implement the hydrogen strategy. European Commission and its regulations. Well, let's be very frank. Nowadays, hydrogen projects are the domain of countries with sea, countries in the south that are able to produce megawatt electrolyzers and that can reduce their costs with the volume of production. But the Czech Republic is lagging behind. It is the Cinderella compared to other European countries who are much more advanced than us. So we won't be able to compete unless we start dealing with those problems. We will be even behind the Baltic countries, and we need to import the energy from them. And we won't have any business going on in the Czech Republic. We will have to import hydrogen from abroad. So I think commonly we should make pressure on European Union to support us. We will talk about this with the minister. We saw the exponential curve regarding the gigawatt of production of hydrogen worldwide. I saw different numbers as well, and I know that the number of investors is growing exponentially as well. Those are figures that show, that document that hydrogen is being more and more popular. And when we want to join this trend, we need to reinforce the central elements. Mr. Mervad and his small team take care of this nowadays. And my opinion is that we need to strengthen this involvement. We need to start preparing legislation, subsidies, etc. I am not going to go into detail. 8 minutes is not enough for that. So, problems in the Czech Republic, there is an aversion against renewable energy sources. Photovoltaic energy sources, that used to be quite unpopular as a topic. Then, of course, wind energy, wind power plants, this is very unpopular in the Czech Republic. However, we need to realize that we have to do something. We can't just sit and wait to see what happens. And of course, the region of Ústí or Moravia, Silesia, we can't do it on our own, alone. We need the support of the government and high authorities. Approval system, I'm not going to go into detail. Anything that should be launched in the Czech Republic is a huge problem. Act on construction, that needs to be changed. All the paperwork, all the red tape. Maybe we could have a new terminology on this act on construction that will deal with the security or energy sources, because we really need to push this through. It is essential. Now, regarding specific experience, you will hear about particular problems of particular projects from me. From the Transition Fund, we got some approval for our hydrogen projects, and we already see some specific problems that hinder us. So I would like to address clerks and representatives of the ministries to look for ways and not for problems. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I didn't take notes when you spoke about the problems, and I'll be glad to follow up on these problems during the discussion. I'll be glad if you give us some specific examples. Tereza Nislerová is the next speaker. She's from Unipetrol. Petr Štempák, project manager for hydrogen and biofuels, also from Orlen Unipetrol. Please join us on stage. The floor is yours. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Petr Štempák. I'm here on behalf of the Orlen Unipetrol company. Together with Tereza Neslerová, we will divide the 8 minutes. I will try to present development projects, and then I'll pass the floor to Tereza, who will speak about the barriers and problems. It all started before the corona crisis. There was no war conflict in Ukraine. There were no disruptions of the supply chains, and we said that it would be suitable to run a project within Central and Eastern Europe where Orlen Unipetrol, which owns certain assets in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, would make 50 refueling stations, 28 for the Czech Republic, 26 for Slovakia, and 54 for Poland. Now we are going to speak about the Czech Republic and Slovakia. You will certainly know the structure of the Benzina petrol stations. There are more than 420 such petrol stations. So next to the highways, there would be a chance to have the refueling hydrogen stations. So we had a good position to start in the Czech Republic because we had a network of petrol stations. Of course, this doesn't mean that the petrol station will terminate its activity there. We also operate in Slovakia. We don't have such a dense network of petrol stations, but we identified certain suitable petrol stations which may no longer exist. And to be able to build the refueling stations within the Hydrogen Eagle project, we have to expect to build certain hubs as well. If I want to distribute hydrogen to the countries, and Unipetrol has made such a pledge, then you need to have hubs in certain locations, because it's no secret that distribution of hydrogen may be interesting up to a certain distance. We can transport hydrogen also to some more remote locations, but if we want to achieve some economic advantage, we need to keep to a certain range of kilometers. In Litvinov, where we have the central oil refinery plant and where we produce white hydrogen, we have a project which has already specific shape with specific size, and then we will identify suitable locations for refueling stations. These are the development projects in a nutshell. Some of them are running, or they are being approved, or they are still being designed. The last slide that I've prepared for you is from my colleagues in Purkyně in Poland, where the project is already running, perhaps not in the form that you can see in the picture, but the line shows what already exists. So it means the production, distribution to the refueling stations. I don't think that they have the refueling station for buses yet, but it's just a question of money. So much for my part of presentation. I'm passing the floor to my colleague. Thank you. Let me go to the last slide with an overview of our efforts to implement the projects. Let me start with something that has been said already a number of times. Starting hydrogen technology or hydrogen economy means that we need subsidies. Since there is almost zero demand for hydrogen, this would otherwise make no economic sense. Let me share a personal story. I worked in the European Commission in the competition department for 5 years, and I was responsible for the approval of projects for large companies. And now after 5 years at the European Commission, I am working on the other side of the French, because I'm trying to get funds for a large company for the implementation of a project that is contributing to the noble goals of the European Commission. And I must say that it's much harder to fight for a subsidy and to achieve some tangible results than to be an official of the European Commission and to provide comments to the member states or to respond to their requirements. What is most important on this slide is that some 3 years ago, more specifically in October 2019, there was a large Hydrogen Europe conference in Brussels where member states and companies were called to prepare European hydrogen projects. Thanks to my previous experience, we in the Central and Eastern Europe presented the Black Horse project, which was supposed to provide enough hydrogen for the V4 countries. We hoped that other member states, as well as companies and our competitors, would join us, and that it would enable implementation of this IPCEI and to start hydrogen economy in our region. Now, after these 3 years, when the Ministry of Industry and Trade learned how to work with IPCEI, there was a call into which there were 11 candidates. And after 3 years, I'm standing in front of you and I'm able to say that there is nothing left from the entire IPCEI. But in other countries, IPCEIs are being implemented. We were told that our project that we have for Unipetrol is too small because over the 3 years the definition has been clarified on what it means, individual project. So during that time our project became small. We could overcome this obstacle because the European Commission told us that we should notify our project as IPCEI, but as a different category of a project. This is quite successful in other countries because we know from our French consultants that this is happening in about 5 other countries, but unfortunately we don't have a partner in the public administration who could get these funds, although we have the Repower EU. But I don't have any information that this money would be available for us. But let me conclude in an optimistic manner. We motivated PK and Orlen also to run an IPCEI. And Hydrogen Eagle was developed based on these efforts. On the Polish side, there was also a lack of knowledge regarding IPCEIs, and they designed a much larger project. They also went through the notification process, and last week, in Wednesday, the European Commission decided about the approval of state aid. This is not formal yet. Poland didn't get it officially, but PK and Orlen will receive state aid amounting to 500 million euro for promotion or developing hydrogen economy. So that's the same project that we had production of green hydrogen on the basis of photovoltaics from biomass, and building a network of hydrogen refueling stations. So let's hope that in Poland they will find the money that will be allocated to PK and Orlen. Not only in Slovakia, but also in Poland, green hydrogen is on the right track. Let's hope that we will also move on and that we will also be one of the countries producing green hydrogen. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Petr. Teresa, afterwards you will also join us on stage for the moderated discussion, and we would like to follow up on your story with IPCEI. Let me now welcome Jan Strobl, a business development manager from the Association of Chemical and Metallurgy Production. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the floor. We'll start by a question to all of you. We heard quite a lot about the different colors of hydrogen, but who of you knows about these different colors? Or who thinks that he's an expert in this? Okay, second question. Could you say what kind of hydrogen is a hydrogen that is a byproduct of a chemical process from nuclear production? Yes, okay. I also thought that I could categorize this kind of hydrogen, but I don't think this anymore. In the upcoming 7 minutes, I would like to tell you how hydrogen is produced in Spokane, and I would like to present the current 2 projects that we have, and at the end I would like to mention some of the obstacles that we have. Can you see my presentation? Yes, great. It works. In Spokane, we have produced hydrogen for about 100 years. We produce it by a membrane brine electrolysis. So it's not electrolysis of water that is so much required and welcome at the European level. It's just a byproduct of the main chemical production, but we talk about 2,000 tons of relatively pure hydrogen a year that we can use. We use it for our internal manufacturing processes, but about half of it, so it's slightly above 1,000 tons, can be used for transport projects or for any other purposes. Unused hydrogen is used for generation of heat. We currently implement 2 different projects. The first of them, which you will probably know, is implemented in cooperation with the public transportation company of Ústí nad Labem. There are several parts of this project, and the director will probably tell you more. We are planning to build a purification and compression station, which will be directly connected to the refueling station. For this project, we will use about 1/3 of the free hydrogen available. This gives us opportunities to run also other hydrogen projects. I will not tell you about the details. The total expected costs amounted to 723 million Czech crowns, but this was a calculation or estimate that is 2 years old. At the end of last year, we started negotiating about the second project with Arriva and Chepro. We would like to use the remaining hydrogen available for development of rail transport. We would use it on the rail track Ústí nad Labem Pardubice or Ústí nad Labem Liberec. We would be able to use a significant part of the remaining free hydrogen. We are now conducting a feasibility study. We are calculating the economic figures and we have defined a schedule, but unfortunately we will probably have to postpone this schedule because of the reasons that I'm going to mention. Now, the obstacles to development of hydrogen projects. Let me mention 3 points. What is the color of the hydrogen that we produce? At the beginning of this year, I didn't know to what extent this issue will be important. Until about March, we didn't think that this would be so important for our project. But then European Commission was very clear about this because they said that it's hard to handle the hydrogen that we produce. It has been already said that they only want to support green hydrogen. But no one said anything else. We were told that in June we should know whether our hydrogen will be eligible or not. Then in July they told us that they are not working, that they will tell us in September, but now we don't know anything. And last week they told us that they cannot guarantee, but that we should calculate the footprint of our hydrogen, which is about 94 grams of CO2 per megajoule. This figure is not final. It may also change, and when we asked about the methodology for calculating this, they said that they had no such methodology. So we had to propose the methodology, and it may be validated. So finally, perhaps this item will need to be extracted from our project.
That was the most important obstacle, and there are other partial points, which is unsuitable legislation. I prepared 2 short stories for you. About 2 months in the course of the year, we dealt with the topic of tax on hydrogen, value-added tax. And then when we talked about the pricing of hydrogen, we talked about the income that we need to involve. The excise duty tax was involved, and we wanted to consult a tax expert, and originally hydrogen was in the category of light elements, of light oils, which was not possible, as we said. We contacted the platform of the region in Ústí, and only the customs region directorate told us that so far there won't be any excise duty tax imposed on hydrogen, so that was a good thing. But then another obstacle came our way. We knew that for some time, and we knew that if we would like to use hydrogen, many other companies would like to use hydrogen for fuel cells, just as us. And we need to hold a license for distribution and production of hydrogen, and we needed to make a deposit of 25 million Czech crowns that's going to lie somewhere that we cannot touch this money. Maybe it will get back to us later, but this is quite a lot of money. Well, we are a huge company, we would probably be able to deal with that, but I'm convinced that many small enterprises that would like to produce hydrogen and sell it for the purposes of transportation could face serious problems because of this deposit payment. And the last point is the turbulent development, the dynamic development on European energy markets. When we talk about the membrane electrolyzers, we have a lower consumption in hundreds of kilowatt hours, and we need to buy this energy somewhere. Of course, you know that the energy prices rose really quickly in the past months, and of course, we feel this impact as well. And unless this energy price is being balanced in the future as well, it is possible that many companies and similar companies as our company would have to shift their business somewhere else from Europe, and that would be a shame because we would lose a lot of clean hydrogen. I'm sorry to be so pessimistic, but that's the case, that's the situation. Sorry for taking more than my time. And if you have any questions, I'm at your disposal.
Děkujeme moc. Prostor pro dotazy je.
Thank you very much. We have time for questions, so don't hesitate and use Slido. I would like to ask Mrs. Simona Miháči from Ústí nad Labem to speak, to join us. She's the Director for European Funds. No, sorry, she's the Executive Director of the Transport Company of Ústí nad Labem. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity to present our project here. Even though after Mr. Strobel it's going to be a gloomy occasion, because everything in our company depends on the color of hydrogen. And as Mr. Strobel said it correctly, if hydrogen is not going to be accepted by European Commission as green, some parts of the projects that deal with the compressor station would have to be cancelled, and our part of the entire procedure would be cancelled as well in this case. So this really upset me, but well, let me introduce my project anyway. The project started in 2018. The city, as the shareholder, signed a memorandum with Spokane regarding usage of hydrogen. You all know this famous soap, Yellen soap with a deer, and we already used hydrogen with hydrogen piping that was transported to the plant, and we calculated the costs of transport. Any cost of transport was so expensive for us that we contacted Spokane, and we thought that it would be good to follow up on the history of Ústí and have hydrogen transported in hydrogen piping to us.
Tomu bychom chtěli, nebo k tomu se chystáme využít toho, že
we would also like to use the fact that the bus depot is quite close to Spokane, and Spokane is on the way from the town center. So when we have our vehicles there, we pass Spokane on our way, as you can see. You see the source of hydrogen, that's the Spokane premises, and you see the future refueling station, and 2,300 meters our vehicles are stationed for the repair and maintenance. So you see the distance. We are going to use this opportunity and the fact that hydrogen is being produced not far from us. There are 4 main pillars of our project. Mr. Strobel mentioned one of them. The next one, next to the purification and compression station, is hydrogen buses with fuel cells. So this part of the project, hydrogen buses with fuel cells, in 2021, when we had our regional conference that approved our project as a strategic project, we really made a huge effort to prepare the project as soon as possible, because we were the first in the country that was able to buy 20 hydrogen buses. As the third pillar, it is the construction of refueling station. We already have the construction permit for this refueling station. We have an agreement, a contract with Spokane, and we've been waiting for a long time, and still the supplier of hydrogen buses asks us when we are going to place our order. Is this realistic? Is this project going to take place? So we are still waiting for the instructions so that we know how to implement it all. I want to show you the buses now. And I think when you are not a part of a transportation company, you probably are not an expert and you won't recognize that those are hydrogen buses. They might look like CNG buses, but they look like modern buses that correspond to the comfort standards of the 21st century. And you'll see it in the presentation here. Refueling station and its visualization in the Sovajova Street is based on a project. And of course, the fourth pillar, which is necessary, is the reconstruction of our repair hall, which is in Předlice. That's about 300 meters, 2,300 meters from Purkyně. This reconstruction is necessary because the trams were stationed there in the 1970s, but then this place was transformed into a bus repair shop, but it does not correspond to our common standards on security of our employees. There are almost 50 employees who work there. So this is important for us in the context of how the hall looks like now, and here how we would like to see it in the future. So we could really have the hydrogen vehicles there. When we prepared our project, we did not include the last aspect that is being mentioned today more and more, and this is the diversification of fuels. At this time, we have a trolleybus traction and a bus traction. From the trolleybus traction, 70% is CNG vehicles. And of course, you all know that within a year, and I think on the 15th of October, it's going to be 1 year, that the distributor of CNG stopped delivering. And almost 1 year, we can't find a distributor. And CNG price rose from 19 to 81 crowns. So is this sustainable in the long term? No, it's not. Not for the transportation company, not for the municipality, not for the municipality budget either. So diversification of fuels together with diesel vehicles was a priority, but at this moment diesel vehicles are operating, and this would help us reduce the costs of the transportation company without being dependent on gas only or on oil only, because we think that's not strategic, this dependence. Well, I've mentioned the problems. First of all, hydrogen, then time, and thirdly, finance. Because, as Mr. Strobel mentioned, we started at the level of 723 million Czech crowns, and now we almost reach 1 billion of Czech crowns, and this is the budget from June this year. Before there is a green light for the project, and we will be able to choose a supplier, we won't be able to finance those high prices because we started at a much lower price at the beginning of our project, and the final price is going to be much higher. The interest rates are going to be much higher as well, and this is working against us. So those are our problems.
Děkujeme paní ředitelce.
Thank you, Mrs. Mohachi, and I would now like to ask the next speaker, Daniel Minařík, Special Envoy of the Moravian Silesian region for the development of hydrogen technology. So now we have a representative of another region than the Ústí region. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. After the whole day of presentations, I will try to stick to the points that we have prepared within our presentation. Lots of thoughts are running through my head. I'm very glad that we can discuss these issues here and that I personally can make a comment. I have worked in the area of hydrogen since my school years, since university studies, which means about 15 years, and I'm very happy that hydrogen is undergoing renaissance. Because some 15 years ago there was quite a suitable time for deployment of hydrogen, but unfortunately the US mortgage crisis prevented this development. Some topics tend to reappear, And I think that this interest in hydrogen will be important not only for the Moravian Silesian region and for the entire Czech Republic. And I hope that this strategy is going to be implemented and that we will achieve tangible results. We are supposed to speak about specific projects implemented in this Moravian Silesian region. And let me go project by project. So this is a recap of the projects that we have worked on in the past 2 years. And when implementing these projects, we had to face the same or similar challenges, and we are now going to look at these barriers from the investor point of view. What we all know, or may not know, is in this overview. There was a project of a public refueling station in the Hraniční area, and there was a specific transportation company that was in charge of the project. What is the current state of the project? There was a tender, but unfortunately, due to understandable reasons, especially due to the price increases, it was no longer possible to implement this refueling station project. So the tender will have to be repeated. There are also projects for the production of vehicles, and as the investor of the transportation company of the city of Ostrava, we have purchased or are going to purchase 10 hydrogen buses. A tender was launched in Ostrava, and the whole tender was submitted to the Office for the Protection of Competition, so it had no tangible result. So the plan was to build a hydrogen valley in the Ostrava region, but sometimes this means also projects for those who manage some operational programs, for example, OP transport. We also focus on production of green hydrogen, and we also discuss the possibility of building company refueling stations. It depends on which operational program can be used for the investment into the company infrastructure. The second category of projects are the so-called process-oriented projects. The Ostrava region is the client who tenders the required solutions. So again, we would like to get 10 hydrogen buses. We established an industry cluster for the purposes of this project. This is an institution that would like to become the driver or the project manager, serving also private entities. As has been said a number of times, hydrogen does not fulfill the definition of technology gas. And you can see several types of gases on the slide, which are used in the Moravian Silesian region. For example, gaseous and generator gas, biomethane, and so on. So these are the sources, potential sources of hydrogen. And in this way, the investors may lose certainty because hydrogen is not clearly anchored in legislation, and the investor doesn't know what will be the next steps in the Czech legal environment. When we speak about tendering in the area of regional public transport, the partner has not been defined at the level of public administration who exactly is responsible for hydrogen. The Ministry of Industry and Trade would be a suitable partner, but we may also speak about control authorities that would evaluate the quality of the hydrogen and the business relationships entering all these legal relationships. What is also highly interesting with regard to the definition of price levels is that you have to decide whether this is too expensive for the region. For example, it's twice as expensive. So what we lack is indexation of the price. So indexing hydrogen as a fuel. This is something that would very much facilitate our work. The region already did this for CNG transport. I would like to add that the Energy Act reflects the state energy concept. We expect that the role of hydrogen will be strengthened in future, and we appreciate that some projects with hydrogen have already been implemented, and it's also described in the documentation. The city of Ostrava, its transport company, has specific experience with the project. For example, we had to initiate the proceedings related to the building of a refueling station. We managed to implement this, but we would be glad if hydrogen is given a strategic privilege, a strategic access to certain approval mechanisms. This would make it much more easy. For example, there is the Act number 100, the so-called EIA Act. If we speak about electrolytic facilities, not about storage facilities for storing hydrogen, which do fulfill the parameters for the accumulation of hydrogen, then if we speak about electrolyzers as the general facilities, we would like to know whether they could be part of category number 2. This might be a general approach to evaluating this technology and this category. So the process is very complex, and EIA is something that makes it even more complicated. It has some impacts for the implementation of the projects. We could also have a discussion on the color range of hydrogen. Yes, I'm going to finish briefly. But just very briefly, what we are concerned about is not the availability of green energy, but we are quite concerned about the investor efficiency. Because if you only produce hydrogen if you have the sun shining, then it's a problem. And you will probably all remember what happened with CNG, the parking lots. And here you have a different perspective when we speak about problems. It's all about neutrality in solutions, because we tend to give preference to certain technologies. Thank you very much for your attention.
Díky moc, Danieli. Díky.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. And the last speaker will be Karel Bouzek, head of the Institute of Inorganic Technology and Vice Dean of the University of Chemistry and Technology, Prague. Karel, please come on stage. And then we will have about 15 or 20 minutes for a discussion, so we will try to summarize all of the learnings. I like the time -3 minutes 50 seconds. Nice. Good almost evening, ladies and gentlemen. What can I add? We seem to start going in circles when speaking about the arguments and barriers and challenges. When I received the invitation to this event, I asked how, as an employee of a university, I can contribute. But looking back at the agenda of this day, there is something interesting. Apart from the Vice-Chancellor, there was no one from the academia giving a speech. This is one of the early stages of developing technology, and it's quite striking that there were not more people from academia, because I think that this is an important aspect, development of technologies. I will skip some of the slides because, as I have said, we tend to repeat what has been already said. Let me start by saying how we distinguish the motivations of the individual parts of our society in development of hydrogen technologies. Let's start with the population and some activist groups that focus on CSR and minimization of impact of technologies on the environment and on improving the environment in where they live. There is also some category of political decisions that try to protect the environment, but that want to provide strategies and to limit our dependence on unstable regions. These decisions should lead to long-term competitiveness of our country. And then there is the economic benefit that is of interest for businesses. The businesses want to secure their long-term operation on the market, and in certain cases they also want to receive suitable sources of energy for their own technology. And a nice example that we saw today were the forklifts in the USA. All of this was formalized by Green Deal. There was an effort to move to an economy based on green hydrogen. I agree with what has been said about the colors. In the roadmap of the EU, I emphasized 2 points. The first of them is that 5.4 million jobs should be created, and in parallel, about the same number of jobs will cease to exist in certain professions. And the question is whether we want to get some of these 5.4 million jobs for ourselves. And whom are we going to hire to these positions? How many people are educated in the area of hydrogen technologies? I don't want to focus only on us, chemists. but we should focus on a larger portfolio of students because there are mechanical engineers, material science. We have many curricula, and almost nothing is going on if we compare it to the plans. This should not only apply to new experts. Of course, there is a possibility to re-qualify. If you are an expert in a connected field, that's no problem. If we don't get a requirement from industrial companies or the state, then the programs will never start to exist.
I think I can skip this because everything has been said so far. But what I think from the perspective of the research sphere is the technological matureness. And I haven't noticed here that we heard something specific about development of such new technologies and their implementation into practice. Because I think that we should not lie to ourselves. We should not pretend. We know that the project that we talk about, installation of refueling stations, purchase of buses, etc., they are essential, but we are not going to create employment only based on those projects. We need to work on that. We need to create new jobs. And we want to produce and develop those technologies by ourselves and not just import them and run them. So that is why we need to cooperate, the academia with the production and companies as well. Otherwise we can't reach our goals. Quite often we hear, well, oil is over, gas is over now, etc. The boss of Toyota development mentioned that the Stone Age is not over because they ran out of stones, but because of the technology that brought some benefits to the population was introduced. And I think that's the same case when we talk about hydrogen. And that's not bad. So thank you. I saved some of the time remaining. Thank you very much, Karel. Please take a seat here at the table, at the discussion table. And I'm going to encourage the speakers before you to join us because there are 20 minutes left. So, friends, if you have any questions, please send me your questions directly or via Slido. And there will be room for questions from the public as well at the end. So there will be 2 rounds of questions. The first round is going to be a follow-up question from your presentation to each one of you, and then in the end, we are going to prepare something for the Minister Sikela, except for just indicating the problems, maybe what would help you, what should change in your field, what could we influence to remove the obstacles. Before we start, I'm just going to sum up the answers to the opinion polls about the barriers. And the answers were very similar. It's legislation, financial support, legislation barriers, shortage of experts, economic approach, etc., etc. The answers keep repeating themselves. So if I may, I'll start with the lady, Teresa Nislerová, who talked on behalf of Unipetrol. And my question now is, you mentioned little budget. What is the difference in the approach of large companies? And why did the IPCEI projects did so badly in the Czech Republic? Why none of the project was selected? And is there a big difference when a large company is participating and when a small company does the same thing? Teresa? When the light is on, it's not working. I know it's quite funny, it's the other way around. Okay, so one project went through. It's again a project of research and development. It's not about the implementation and investment in the infrastructure that would really help to introduce the technologies in the practice. We should not just talk about companies that are developing fuel cells, etc. Petr Mervat mentioned that, but we should also say that we launched a common infrastructure and distribution together. In all the subsidies, I can't really see that large enterprises are excluded. It's also aimed at large companies. But in the practice, I see or I perceive that large enterprises are not really welcome. European Commission prefers small and medium-sized enterprises, and they prefer a certain company in Slovakia. I'm not going to name the company, but that's not really a problem or an issue of IPCEI, that we were a large company. I see the problem somewhere else. European Commission changed the rules of the game because that was in August 2021. We worked all the time, even at the weekends, so that really our application is as complete as possible. We need to answer 60 questions during 5 days, and then you expect, well, then you have to wait for 2 months to keep answering other questions. So I was the one who did this before from the European Commission, who wanted to have a reaction to my questions, and now I see it from the other side, when the colleagues needed to respond within 5 days. And then after many months you find out, well, in May you find out that our project is not a part of IPCEI. Our project is too small actually, but European Commission does not hinder us to introduce it under other rules of environmental guidelines, CEAC. So I understand that this wasn't a problem in many other countries to introduce these projects under a different framework. But in the Czech Republic, when we discuss this with the ministries of industry and trade or transport, it's not really feasible. They tell us, no, we are not in charge of this project. Ministry of Transport, no, that's not our case either. So maybe we would be able to boost this project for IPCEI and double the capacity as the colleagues in Poland did. However, I think that no one is really interested from the state administration. It's supposed to be our private business, yes, but for the launch of this business, we need something, and we can take a look at the perspective. We can also help the Czech Republic fulfill its obligations. The Czech Republic needs to fulfill those obligations. You have certain driving ranges from one refueling station to another, and Orlen Unipetrol is willing to set up this network of refueling stations. There is no one else who would be able or ready to do that. We are not discussing the price. There is no one else who would be ready to do this instead of us. So I would like to see the ministries as an equal partner, and we wanted to contribute by 50%. Yes, it is a huge project, you are right, and it was about production of 4,000 tons of green hydrogen a year and a construction of 22 refueling stations and some logistics in between those stations. So it would be about 3.8 billion Czech crowns. So, of course, this technology is incredibly expensive. So we ask for funding about 50%. And even so, I think that the benefit of the private capital was huge. But, well, I'm always an enthusiast in our company, and without me, our company probably wouldn't take part in this IPCEI, but I think that I'm just bothering everyone rather than seeing a common interest with a strong stakeholder who would cover the financing by 1.5 billion Czech crowns. Thank you. An additional question. So when are the projects going to be implemented in reality? What is your estimate? It depends on the public support. Of course, you know the story. When we are constructing, or we have been constructing one petrol station for more than 2 years, but on the other hand, we are the only one who is building those refueling stations in the capacity for buses as well. And the estimate for Berendorf is, well, you keep constructing because you won the tender. No, you are not constructing. Oh yes, we are constructing. But this time we should finish the construction in December for the first station. And for the next two, it depends on the Ministry of Transport that did not extend our subsidy project, and we had to suspend the construction of 3 other stations. We even had the tender. We already chose a supplier for our project, but it wasn't possible to extend the deadlines for the subsidy project, and we needed to quit 3 projects. And now about Brno and Litvinov, that's the decision of the Ministry of Transport. The question is whether for Pilsen and Prague too we can change the location to Litvinov and Brno with the same conditions. Our agents keep telling us that it is possible, but the Ministry of Transport has been evaluating this for the past 2 months. So that's the answer to the question whether those stations will be built or not, because we can't build them only from private sources. Simona Mohaci, another question was hydrogen valleys, the valleys where the technology is being followed up. There is a synergy in technology. Ústí is one of hydrogen valleys, and you have international experience in this field. Does this help you when testing the development of hydrogen technologies in Ústí, when you test hydrogen buses and infrastructure? Or does it matter in what region you are located? It's still the same work, systematic work, with people who are involved? Absolutely. When we entered the project, we only had our own perspective. And since then, as we know the conditions of the European Commission, since we know the conditions, we look for alternative sources of energy or alternative sources of hydrogen that we could use. And we share our know-how with our colleagues, and we learn within our town, because we are a municipal company. We learn to use a new type of fuel, and we've never tested it before. No matter whether we speak of Ostrava or the transportation company in Ostrava, you are a pioneer as well. But of course, together with the entire regional conference and hydrogen platform and regional representatives, we want to push through hydrogen in Ústí. Thank you. Karel, a question for you. At the beginning, you mentioned several clusters of problems, national problems, European problems, and non-hydrogen problems. I want to ask about the infrastructure for hydrogen, because you can have refueling stations, you need technology infrastructure for hydrogen. Is the role of the state important, or how do you perceive the role of the state? If the state would invest massively and connect the Czech Republic, would it mean that the scaling is possible? Would it mean this bright future that we talked about?
I can't provide clear answer about what we should do, but I'm convinced, because of our activities within the Ústí region, that we have had quite a lot of experience, and I think that the Ústí region is one of the most suitable regions where a complex hydrogen value chain should be developed. If we speak about transition of the region, We should also say that there are a number of brownfields where parks for renewable energy sources could be located. I like photovoltaics, but we could also build wind power plants, although the conditions for this are not so favorable. Mr. Bozek talked about know-how and human resources. We are ideally placed here. And there is a long-term tradition for the potential of development of a hydrogen economy. These are facts, and it's up to us how we can use them. But we can only be successful if we can overcome the barriers that have been outlined here, and I'm sure that we can discuss them in greater detail tomorrow. There is also a question to Mr. Zemánek. You said that your members, the companies, have specific problems. Could you be more specific? You said that some of the issues related to hydrogen are very real. So could you give us some specific examples? With the change of Green Deal, with the decarbonization and the shift from fossil fuels, there are a number of companies that have to discuss the future. And the journey that we selected in the Ústí region, which is focusing on hydrogen, is now going through the different stages. So first we established the platform. It went from bottom up. It was filled up with stakeholders who were interested in hydrogen. Then we decided to draft the hydrogen strategy, which says what kind of activities we are going to implement to be able to cover the whole portfolio. So we set up all of these activities, then the strategy for hydrogen was adopted, the hydrogen projects were approved, we could see some specific examples, and we are going back again to the start because we can see that the projects are not feasible. I assume that the Moravian-Silesian region has adopted a slightly different strategy, but you have the same results. So we have a cluster. We need to cover the entire portfolio. We talk about the Just Transition Fund, but it's not only about Just Transition Fund, it's also about other funds. We can't put up just with the traditional system, traditional approach of government, and government needs to push for our projects also in Brussels. This should be the main topic. We should look at the ways how these two regions, or also the Karlovy Vary region, could implement this transition. A question to Mr. Minařík. A specific question. What made the refueling station Hraničík so expensive, and when do you intend to launch the new tender? What made it more expensive? Look at the current situation, the price of commodities and inflation. The price grew significantly. So this is the main factor. I understand that the question was also whether this was not our fault as well. But primarily, this is mainly due to an increase in the prices at the wrong time. So when we launched the tender, that was the wrong time because the prices started to grow. So there is no other factor. And there is a parallel to the project run for Benzina. the Ministry of Transport should fund the project within OP Transport, and we should be able to refinance the project. And we intend to launch a new tender, and we would like to roll out at the beginning of next year, but it's not a binding deadline for us. Mr. Bozek, you opened a highly important topic, qualified workforce that can be used in these industries. What do we need to change the current situation? I know that it requires lots of books, lots of workshops and so on, but just briefly in points, what do you think that we really lack in terms of the approach of the state, the business, the stakeholders and so on? Technical education is undergoing a crisis, and this is something very new in technical education. We could use it as an opportunity if it's clear in society that the trend has been stable. If you imagine that your kid comes and asks what he or she should study in future, you would probably recommend an area that will be something with prosperity for the long term, for the next dozens of years. And in the Czech Republic, we tend to think that this is, again, something that was invented by someone in Brussels, and that in 6 years' time, the situation will be completely different. If you look at Saxony, I know that over the past 2 years, at least 2 or even a third one, research initiatives were approved. The third one should be in an amount of 2.5 billion Czech crowns. The objective of these initiatives is to create spin-off companies that will employ the young generation, and this will be the way forward, although it's not so much visible. And the question to Mr. Strobl. You were very critical in your presentation, which is all right. But you are a business development manager. What are the next milestones for Spokane in terms of cooperation with public administration, with the states, and so on? What do you focus on? I spoke about 2 projects. Apart from these 2 projects, we don't have enough hydrogen to be able to implement the project. But hydrogen for the transport company is key. We have to provide it. And as for the hydrogen for the second project, we will supply this hydrogen, and it would be realistic to supply it, but we will see whether we are able to produce the sufficient amounts of hydrogen. And then we will see what amount of hydrogen is left. But we are not concentrating on this type of discussions now. And now a round of summarizing our thoughts. Let's go from Karel to the right. What would you recommend to the industry? What should it be? What is the one key factor that we need for the change? Continuous willingness to share and to communicate, to cooperate. And in some cases, let's be even more open. I know that we have learned to be open, but let's be even more open and let's eliminate the barriers in the hydrogen industry that are due to our inability to cooperate sometimes. Teresa? If we have a hydrogen strategy, I would like that we achieve a consensus at society level. I want the companies developing this area to be prioritized by public administration. Public administration should cooperate with the entities that want to develop hydrogen economy. And what should also improve is flexibility of authorities, because if there is time span of 3 years before our submission of application and approval, that's very bad. I can see 2 enormous trenches. One of them is something that Mrs. Nislerová mentioned, a big gap, a big trench between public administration officials and companies. And the second trench is about the difference between Western countries and Eastern countries. So I would like both of these categories to start approaching, because only in this way we can achieve the goals set by the European Union. Mrs. Mohachi, what I would like to see is greater speed in approving hydrogen projects, because it means high capex if you are not fast enough. I would definitely agree. And on behalf of Purkyně, I would like our hydrogen to be considered low-emission hydrogen. We will be then able to use it for the projects that we have started. Mr. Minařík, what I feel is that what is important is decision. We are looking at technologies from the neutral point of view. Perhaps we could define some sharing when defining the flows to the Czech Republic. And the municipalities and the public administration should know where we are heading, and at the local level and at the level of structurally disadvantaged regions, we would then be able to shape our strategies in hydrogen. With all the technologies that will help us resolve our energy crisis. Are there any other such technologies? Thank you. Well, my colleague used some Moravian terms. I'm sorry, I don't know them. But we seem to repeat the same, all of us. We need to be enthusiastic. All of the stakeholders need to show enthusiasm. Because if we see enthusiasm not only on the side of companies, then we will succeed and overcome all of the barriers that have been identified. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your input in this discussion. Dear friends, the first day of the H2 Forum in Ústí nad Labem, Opportunity for Transformation, is over. However, I would like to invite you to participate matchmaking and informal networking. There are lots of topics that you can discuss. I would like to thank the Ústí region, the Evangelista Purkyně University, the Economic Chamber of the Ústí region, Czech Invest, and the E15 Daily. If you have a badge and you are going to leave and not come back tomorrow, please hand it back at the reception. The same applies for the headsets that you have been using for interpretation. Enjoy the evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.